What's up, guys? Riccardo Baleia here with another edition of the Riccardo Baleia podcast. We're on episode 5. I can't believe that I'm in this far. And guys, before we get to speaking to our guest today, I just want to give you a quick little reminder. If you can like the video here, subscribe on this side. It means so much to me. Please share it out. And you're going to want to share it because we're going to have a good storyteller, one of the most interesting men in jiu-jitsu, really good friend of mine I've known ever since, you know what I mean? One of the guys that helped me out tremendously, Mr. Scott Nelson. Welcome to the show.
What's up, buddy? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man. You know, I say you're the most interesting man because like you have tons of stories, you know what I mean? You just got essentially, left Mexico, you were in California, you had a crazy story in Pakistan, you've been to Brazil. You're the man that's contributed a lot to jiu-jitsu. And, I just want to, before we start getting into that whole storytelling, how's things with you right now? Like, where are you right now? You're in Vegas. What's going on with you?
I'm in Las Vegas right now. I own a little condo out here with my buddy Dan Hart from Alpha BJJ. And I just left Mexico because of the coronavirus stuff. I have a cancer hospital down there. 2 of them now, actually, called Chipsa Hospital. We focus on patients who have done what's called failed standard of care. So usually meaning whatever they tried to do where they're from stopped working and they've run out of options. And we work with some of the top scientists and doctors on our scientific advisory board in the world. And we've built a cancer hospital that's built on like a fight camp type mentality, so looking at it like these people are in the fight of their lives. Very similar to like getting into a regular fight. And so we have like mental coaches for them, and just like in fighting, you want to have, like, you're fighting a kickboxing karate guy, you got to have a great kickboxing karate coach and a great anti-kickboxing karate coach. So we take a look at like we're a very integrative hospital, and we take a look at works across the spectrum: conventional medicine, alternative medicine, immunotherapies, and look for what works best for the patient in their particular cancer.
Yeah, and it's awesome what you've been doing there. I can't believe. I remember years ago, wanting to come visit you at the OTM warehouse in California, like I used to do all the time. And then you were kind of like, you know what, man, I've, opened up a shop in Mexico, and you had a bunch of stuff happen in your life that kind of made a big change. And now you're kind of giving back to the society, if you will, through the hospitals. And that's an amazing thing. But, I want to touch back a little bit on your jiu-jitsu roots. For those of you who don't know, Scott Nelson, one of the original founders of Onthemat, OTM, was the first ever jiu-jitsu website that reported on jiu-jitsu from Brazil. We had the latest scoops of stuff going on from Brazil, and it was from Scotty and Gumby. Alan Marquez and Scotty were the original jiu-jitsu geeks reporting jiu-jitsu to North America. So, Scotty, tell me a little bit about how you started your jiu-jitsu journey and how you guys kind of started onthemat.com.
Well, sure. Like my friend Rob Carter showed up at my house, I think right after UFC 1 or 2, with a videotape of a skinny Brazilian guy in a gi getting a cage and beating everybody up. And at that time, he was already training with Ralph Gracie for a minute. He might have even already been blue belt by then. I'm not sure. And, like right after that, I was living in Hollywood and driving all the way down to Newport Beach to take like 1 or 2 classes a week. They only showed like 3 moves a class.
Who are you training with back in Newport?
That was with Ralph Gracie, with Rodrigo.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Halson.
Okay.
And then after that, so I don't really count that as training because it was just more like going into class. But
yeah,
in late '95, I had moved up to the Bay Area for a job, and I drove by Ralph Gracie Jiu Jitsu, and I went in and signed up there right away. Started training full time with Ralph. Of course, that's where I met Gumby and BJ and all the old school Camarillos and everybody that was out of that gym back in the day.
Nice. And Ralph's, I remember competing and traveling in jiu-jitsu in North America, and I'll say it again, Half and high-end school at that time, you know, in the early beginnings of jiu-jitsu competitions in North America, Half's was specifically Half's was known as having like the toughest school guys, you know, the toughest crew, a very, very hardcore, hard-nosed gym. So, you know, you had Half when he was, I believe he was still fighting in Valley Tudo and stuff like that at that time. So what was the training like, you know, at Half's back in the day, you know, at that time? Like you mentioned, you know, guys like BJ were there, you know, Kurt Osiander, one of Half's, you know, most well-known students. What was the training like there? Was it like a mix of like MMA or Valley Tudo and Jiu-Jitsu? Was it all gi training? Did you guys throw the gis tops off? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Half was still, you know, extreme fighting, all that was going on. But, you know, back then it was still, we had people showing up off the street. You know, any given Tuesday, somebody comes in like, want to take the Gracie challenge, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And we mostly did train in the gi, but everything was trained from a, you know, a point of you were going to fight jiu-jitsu against other martial arts, other styles, you know. So it was all street fight oriented, but it was almost always in a gi. Of course, we did some no gi a few days a week. But it was just like, you know, meat and potatoes, gi jiu-jitsu that would work if you took the gi off. Either way.
Yeah. So getting to On the Mat, you know, that was sort of a big deal in the jiu-jitsu media world because essentially that was the first North American jiu-jitsu media company that started. You guys did interviews, you guys had a website, you had matches, you had highlights, you started doing VHS tapes, which I, you know, proudly owned every single one. They were some of the greatest VHS tapes ever. Dengue Fever, my personal favorite. Anyways, yeah, you guys did a lot of cool stuff in the industry, and of course, you know, you had that interview with Valij talking about Ryan Gracie, the one that's become this viral, you know, sensation. So, tell me a little bit about how On the Mat started and how you know, kind of went from starting the company with Gumby as kind of like a cool hobby to getting an interview with Walid. And when you did do the interview with Walid, did you know how important it was and how much of a, you know, internet sensation that it would one day become?
Right. So, okay, that's a lot of questions in one. But so, you know, Half's school was in Mountain View, and we were in the tech boom in the tech capital of the world, Silicon Valley. There's a guy named Don Geddes, who's a black belt under Half that trained with us, and he had BJJ.org, the original back in the day. So,
and sorry to cut you off. His site was basically like more of a here's a website, and it had links to everyone else's jiu-jitsu website, if I'm correct, right? And it was like, I remember it was black with green font, and it was just all links to everyone, like all the Gracies, UFC, NHB, like any of the main or the first jiu-jitsu schools in America and Brazil. Yeah, just flashbacks. Sorry, continue.
That's fine. You know, so he was the first one. Then there was In the Guard.
Yeah.
And then we came along, but we're the last one that's still up from them. So we went up to 1996. We were the first downloadable, you know, Valley Tudo and you know, jiu-jitsu videos. They used to be 120 pixels by 60 pixels, and you'd have to press download overnight to watch like a 3-4 minute match.
Wow. What was the first jiu-jitsu match that you guys ever uploaded to the site?
I think it was one of Dave Camarillo's flying arm locks.
Yeah, I remember that.
There were some gifts of like triangles, how to do some moves and stuff like that. We used to have the gallery of cauliflower ears there. So, you know, Gumby was working at a company, I think it was called IX Micro, and they were doing video compression. So his job was to compress videos at work. And so we just had video cameras. We started going to the tournaments. We started recording the matches. And a lot of people started coming up to us at the events and saying, hey, I tried to download that video. It crashed like 20 times. You know, if I give you a couple bucks, will you put it on a VHS tape and send it to me?
Yeah.
So that's how it all first started. People were asking for videotapes for their matches or for other people's matches. And then we just started putting stupid stuff in between the matches.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, the first video was American penetration.
Yeah.
It was Matt Serra and Mark Lehman and like all that first. It was most of the content came from Ed Clay's tournament that he did in North Carolina, and so you know, Ed's my business partner in the hospital right now. He did that Pro-Ams tournament, which was like an Abu Dhabi before.
Yeah.
You know, Abu Dhabi. I mean, if you look at if that card played today, it would be, you know, as big a card as any. So
yeah, I remember that. I flew out. That was in Raleigh, North Carolina, right?
Carolina, yep.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a light, middle, and a heavyweight division. Leo Vieira, Shaolin, Coprito Saulo, Jeff Monson, and Hoyler fought a guy from AMC Pancration in a super fight.
Hazlitt, something like that.
Yeah, Anthony Hamlet, I think it was. And yeah, that was a sick tournament. But let's
what about Matt Serra versus Leo Zinho?
That was crazy. It's funny because
so bad, man.
You know, that one, watching it there, I was training with the Alliance guys. I was there training with Leo before the event. So I was like Team Leo, and that whole match was beautiful. And then it's funny because I talked to Sean Williams about it afterwards, and he's like, he kind of didn't get the points that he did, you know what I mean? But you know, that's just, he had a little influence from you know, Steve Maxwell was refereeing, and I think he was under a lot of pressure. I don't even think he'd ever refereed, you know. So yeah. But
he had a certain tournament. I've only refed one tournament, you know.
Yeah. It sucks, man. I used to do it back in the day. I got kind of forced into it, and it's too much pressure. You know what I mean? If you have because it's not fair too. Like if you have a brain fart, like an honest brain fart, you screw over a competitor. It's not fair. You know what I mean? And then sometimes you end up arguing with parents, and they don't even know the rules, and it's just, you get emotionally involved, and you're just like, you can't. I just came to a point where I was like, I had enough of it. So, anyways, let's get to, how did you end up on Pepe Beach talking to Walid Ismail, and how did you do that interview? That's what I want to know.
Okay, so I didn't actually interview him on Pepe Beach, but I lived in a house that was right down the street from Pepe Beach, and we would go there after training. That's where most of the guys from Gracie Baja back in the day hung out. Of course, I knew Hyan from Half, you know, my instructor, and we just showed up at the beach, and we were hanging out there, and it happened to be the day that Hyan and Valij kind of like squared off with each other, and a big fight almost broke out at the beach. So that had happened. There had also been like they had another altercation earlier at like, I think it was this place called Ilia Fantasia. It was at like a nightclub or a bar or something like that. I don't remember the details. Anyways, they had another run-in. And so, you know, I had interviewed Hyan about it, and I wasn't actually going to interview Valij, but I was going to meet Carlson Gracie Sr., and I took buses from all the way from Baja de Tijuca to Copacabana. Like 1999, dude. Like, dude, there was like no gringos around ever. You know? There with Mickey O'Riggs and another guy, and like we were literally the only gringos on the mat the whole 2 months that we were there, until Alberto Crane and Amal showed up. They'd already been living in Brazil, but they were up in Belo Horizonte.
Okay.
At that time, Amal Easton had gone back from, and so yeah, I went all the way down there, and I was going to interview Carlson, and I was interviewing Carlson, and I asked Carlson a question, and he just turned to his translator and fucking yelled some shit, and he said, you know, he goes, I've answered these same questions a million times in the media. Tell this kid to go read somebody else's interview. And I was at his academy, right? And like Mario was there, and Zem Mario was super nice. I just met him. He goes, don't worry about the old guy, you know, blah, blah, blah. Let me get another interview for you. And he goes and he gets fucking Valij, right?
Oh, okay.
Like, oh shit, I just seen Valij at Pepe Beach. So if you listen to that audio recording, and I think it's on YouTube.
Yep.
He asked like one question.
Yeah,
On a 20-minute rant. Two kind of man. Yeah, one man, pussy. Chicken. Yes, that went super viral. That was actually probably that video, those audios, I mean, probably are what got us the most attention at first, on the internet of what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
Like audio interviews or video interviews at that time.
Yeah, because I remember like back at like, a lot of people today in the modern jiu-jitsu don't understand that like back in the day, like they used to call them like pit boys, right? Like the guys in Brazil would walk around, like, and if you were Gracie Baja and you saw Alliance, like you would just like you would fight, you know what I mean? Like you would end up brawling at a party, at the beach, at a nightclub.
Fights at the nightclubs, the bar, the beaches, the ball.
Yeah, so we've kind of thankfully gone away from that for a little bit, and to a degree we've kind of come a little bit full circle with trash talk now online. It's a little bit different, but back in the day it was you couldn't get away with that shit. So if you were saying something online on onthemat.com, if like Waleed ended up seeing Hyan, I think at Worlds, and they got into a brawl. I remember seeing a clip of that disappeared, but they had to like escort Waleed out of there. So, it got real quick back in the day. But how did you first end up in Brazil anyways? Like what was it that got you out there? Were you, because what I remember was you went there for 2 weeks and stayed for 2 years. That was some story. You know what I mean? But what was the real story, how you went up?
There for 2 months in '99 for the millennium to be in Brazil for the year 2000. Nikio Wiggs went with me, and this other guy from House went with me, and I stayed there for 2 months, man. And when I like left there, I'm like, I'm gonna figure out how to move down here.
Yeah.
I just spent like the next 2 years working on getting on the mat, where I was selling videotapes and selling stuff, and I got laid off from my work, and I got a settlement check for it. And then 9/11 hit. And so like right after 9/11 hit and everything, I was like, I'm out of here, dude. There's no I have almost enough money to get started in Brazil. And so I sold a whole bunch of stuff that I had off to like my friends and whoever would buy it. And I packed 3 bags. I moved to Brazil for 3 years.
And then you went there, you were training, you were partying, you were hanging out, and the one thing I remember is you were helping out a lot of the gringos that would show up, it was kind of the thing. You had to call Scotty if you were going to go, unless you knew somebody from Rio. And then you guys had the compound or the fighter house, or what did you guys call it? The OTM house, I used to call it. I never made the trip to the OTM house, but I remember always hearing about some stories about it. And then, you guys stayed in Brazil and kind of did your thing there. So what was like, without getting you in any trouble here, what was kind of some crazy stories that you have from the OTM days, back in the day, or something jiu-jitsu related that you saw in Brazil that probably wouldn't fly these days?
Well, I mean, we had this penthouse that was 4 doors down from Pepe Beach, which is like the nicest beach there. And it was also about 5 blocks from this nightclub called Nooch. And it was on the street as, what was that Irish bar? Shenanigans or something?
Yeah.
So like, it was like the trifecta Bermuda Triangle of trouble,
And I remember Shenanigans because below it, they had that steakhouse, Cajetão.
That was the one. This was they opened a big one, a 2-story one in Baja.
Okay. Yeah, in LeBlanc, they have Cajetão, and then on top of Shenanigans, there was like a little pub or something. I always remember that. But yeah, sorry, continue.
I mean, the biggest problem was in Brazil. It was like basically, me and Danny Do Nothing from OTM, we lived there pretty much full time. And then all the other gringos would come down and stay. And so they would come down and stay for whatever it was, 10 days or 2 months or something like that. And they would be loaded with cash and ready to go and want to go have fun. But we already lived there like a year. And, everyone in Brazil thought I was rich, but like, I was working my ass off selling video until 101 submissions came out, right?
Yeah.
commissions came out, it wouldn't stop selling. It was before I sold something like 38,000 copies, which was
wow,
heard of in jiu-jitsu back then.
yeah,
Nobody was selling anything like that. And I got, once that hit, I had some finances down there. Plus the Hayal dropped down for a little while. But these guys would all come down and they would go out and they would meet girls, and they would usually bring the girls back to my house because we had that really huge, nice house, And the guys would leave, but I'd still know all the girls. I started going out in Rio, like all over the place, and I knew just tons and tons of groups of girls because mostly they had dated other guys that had come down over the while, and that just led to some problems, a lot of jealousy, a lot of anger about it. And I grew up in New York City. I got really good at getting into nightclubs. So like by the time I got to Brazil, I could talk my way into every nightclub there. And guy Brad Nicolaarson from the compound, he came down with a couple of his buddies, and we just terrorized the city for like about 2 months and just train all day, party all night.
Yeah.
And it was just different back then. It was like Brazil was fun. It was a pretty wild place, man. It was scary. It's dangerous,
Yeah.
So shot in the front seat of our car. And
Oh, wow.
To blame my friend that we murdered this guy.
Oh,
and
wow.
That was a situation that happened in Brazil that got crazy. A lot of street fights would happen. Yeah. Things that's how it was back then there. If tempers got flared, people didn't pull out guns or whatever, you just kind of stepped over to the side of the beach or stepped out of the club, and sometimes you could see some pretty technical fights right there in the streets. But it was a different era of jiu-jitsu, and it was definitely a different era of like the internet and things were.
Yeah, it's funny because I mentioned like, a lot of guys went to you for help and, trying to get hookups and stuff when they went to Brazil. I remember seeing you at Worlds in 2004. And I remember you were like trying to sell like some Nikes or something to a bunch of the black belts. They wanted all the American Nikes or something. And it was the first thing that I saw. And then it was that point you were telling me something about the gis because Corral was huge at that time. And I remember you were telling me that Jacare used to like cut something out or something like that on his sleeve, or there was something funky with his sleeve. And then I felt like that was a seed for Lucky Gi, which we'll get to in a sec. But then, we ended up meeting in Manaus. You and Danny Do Nothing went out there. I went to that Copa Osvaldo tournament. That was my swan song, my Al Bundy, Polk High School. That was my one big tournament that I won back in the day. But yeah, I saw you guys there. I had my girlfriend at the time was my wife, and that was really cool because like when I went to Manaus, I remember like I wanted to train with Jacare because he was 2004, he was the man, and then like he wasn't there, like he wasn't training because it was just after Worlds. He stayed in Rio, and I was kind of stuck out there. So I hooked up with Cristiano Ribeiro, started training with him, fought in the tournament, and then the next year I think you were still there. And I couldn't find Cristiano, and I was like, Scotty, I gotta, what am I gonna do here, man? And then you gave me Bibiano's phone number, and then Bibiano came to my wife's place, picked me up, took me to Clube Pina, and then I just got like hooked up. I went there the next year, and that was awesome, man. So I'm pretty grateful for for everything you've done in Brazil and other stuff for me, in the fight shop business and a lot of other stuff, but. Like I said it in the beginning of this, like you contributed a lot to the sport. One of the first jiu-jitsu media companies. And if you know or if you don't know, you got to recognize that Scotty was one of the first, major gi manufacturers, American-made gi manufacturers to really start the whole like exclusive gi drops and all sorts of stuff, higher price point gis. That was with the Lucky Gi, and I know it's funny because I've heard a couple different black belts who will remain nameless claim that they gave you the inspiration for the Lucky Gi and the design, but we'll talk about that after. But tell us a little bit about how the Lucky Gi started and what it was like eventually starting your own gi company.
Well, yeah, I mean, it actually started at BJ Penn's house when he was still training with House back in the day, and we were talking about lucky gis, like which gi he had this thing where he would sleep in his gi before the tournament, and how it fit was really important, and he and I would sit there and talk about the fit of gis and how the gis were made and stuff, and that started it. And then when I went down to Brazil, I wanted to make gis actually in Brazil.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
I was in all the different factories and talking to people. I went to the Corral factory. Those guys were really cool. I spent a lot of time at the Krugen's factory because it was in Recreio, right outside Baja. Yeah. And like I just kept my mouth shut. You know, no one really ever expect me to speak Portuguese or be able to talk. And I had a phone camera back then. Nobody had a phone camera in Brazil.
Wow.
Ever seen one. I took a lot of pictures. I learned a lot. And at the time, I was sourcing gameness gis for Ed, my business partner in Chipsa Hospital, down there. And you know, we saw the gameness factory down there. They were just basically stealing from him. They found like he was shipping to Europe, and his distributor guy Tim was his friend and was telling him, hey, they're shipping all over Europe without paying you. So that got me really worried. I got a lot of help from this girl named Chris from KF Fighter as well. That kind of made the Baja guys unhappy because they had the CBJJO back then.
Okay.
But they were super nice. They made tons of samples for me and taught me a lot. So I got worried about like dropping the first, everyone calls it the first designer gi, right? You know, no one did like a lot of this stuff, the contrast stitching, the inside print. There were gis that were one solid piece, but they kind of were square.
Yep.
I had a tailor that helped me design the sport cut, you know, to it. And I implemented a lot of things. I talked to a lot of different black belts about top guys about what they did like, when they didn't like. We actually used a different gusset in the pants. Now every in the world has that gusset in it. I stole it from karate. Like I didn't make it up, but like I'm like, hey, you know, BJ was so flexible he could pull his leg and the pants would catch before his leg would catch, and he'd have to reach up, pull the crotch in. So like, how do you adjust the pants to have a shorter, you know, instead of being such like a baggy trash bag, fit better, you know, have a better the position the crotch better and be able to open it and put the knee pads in it. So, you know, just a lot of different changes. And I think we're probably the first ones that really went out on the style of the gi. Mm-hmm. People put a patch here, or, you know, two guys dancing on their gi. And we really took that to like a different tattoo graffiti vibe to it.
Yeah, it was, I remember lucky gis were like, you couldn't, like when I had a fight shop, I remember I was selling them for you in Canada, and we could never keep them. You know what I mean? Like they would fly. As soon as we got them, we'd have pre-orders for them, and it was a really cool thing, you know. So, you know, again, you know, not only you contributed for the jiu-jitsu media, and you know, you did the kimono thing, and then you ended up opening up the OTM Fight Shops, one of the first fight shop business owners in the United States. You guys had tons of fight shops. I still remember looking at like the pictures of you guys having like the OTM Hawaii grand opening, and like all the top jiu-jitsu guys were there with the Hawaiian necklaces. I'm sorry if I don't know the name, the lays or whatever. And I was like, man, that's cool. You know what I mean? So that gave me inspiration, like to open up my own thing. And you know, you're always really cool to help me out. And I'm super appreciative of that. Like, you know, hooking me up with stuff from you guys, even other people. And, you know, I'm really grateful for that. Now talking about jiu-jitsu specifically, you know, you guys filmed a lot of matches, you know, and you guys became a distributor for Osvaldo Paquetá for his you know, his tapes and a lot of the film work that he did. So like, what were some of the most memorable events that you know, were at or filmed or, you know, kind of was a part of? Because in a ways, like I kind of took some notes from your book. Like I always tried to be involved in events and like not just be there as a fan. Like I always thought of the bigger picture of jiu-jitsu, and I kind of looked at what you used to do, and you were always kind of behind the scenes and not necessarily running an event, but you were always like with the promoters or with the top black belts. And I always kind of aspired to do the same. So what were some of the more memorable jiu-jitsu like tournament memories or matches that you recall that you guys were a part of?
Well, First, thanks for saying that, man. And you've always been a good friend to me and helped me out whenever you can. So I appreciate that as well. And some of the more exciting matches. I mean, I think you just put one of my matches up not too long ago from Campos when Marcelo Garcia showed up and just smoked everyone. I actually competed in that tournament and filmed that tournament. Brian Simmons from Grappler's Quest was there with me too. We both competed. Last minute, they threw us into the pro round, but the two of us had been drinking out the night before.
Oh man.
Well, it didn't fare too well for either one of us, but
is that where he got his neck hurt or something, or is that somewhere else?
That was somewhere in the United States. I don't know.
Okay.
That was drama. There was a lot of exciting matches. I mean, really, for me, the thing about Brazil back then was every weekend there was a little tournament, and I was so good. I would try to go to all these little tournaments. So I was meeting guys when they were the purple belt, going to every tournament and smoking everyone. Guys like Lagarto, Talis Leches, some of those guys. Even like I was going to tournaments. Jacare was a brown belt and smoking people at all of the tournaments back. Then there was a kid named Saul from Gracie Baja. Of course, Shadow Pino from Gracie Baja. There's a lot of those really good guys. Back then, Andre Galvão was a little blue belt, purple belt. He fought in every tournament, and he was with Oswaldo Alves. There's another guy, Gabriel Kitteber, that was there. So we saw like really good guys. I was a Crianche, Margarita tried to throw me out of Brazilian top team one day for being a Crianche, and Paquetá put his foot down, and Mario Sperry was like, dude, this guy's not going anywhere. Like, who are you for calling anyone a Crianche? That was pretty crazy. I've had a few run-ins back in the day with Margarita, even back in the day with Verdum, like just different, I stood out, man. I met a lot of people while I was there. I always try to help out at the events any way I can. I always just saw it as contributing to the greater good of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
The more popular, the better jiu-jitsu got, the better it was for everybody. Not everybody felt that way back in the day, at least. There's a lot more scarcity, and people were like, I don't know, they didn't get it. Like, the sport's got to grow for you to grow, buddy.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that I always tried to do over the years is like, just give people a hand where they needed it, in jiu-jitsu, whether it be like black belts coming to Canada or, hooking people up with seminars, because it's like you said, there's like kind of like a greater good, and if we can all kind of contribute a little bit to kind of just helping each other and growing the sport, it'll be good for everyone. But if we're all just like competitive with each other and like trying to like, hoard all the money and stuff, it's just not enjoyable, so I kind of, again, like I took a note out of your book there and tried to really, do my part to contribute. Now, like, you had the shops, and obviously you kind of ventured into different stuff with the hospitals and, and so forth. Have you kind of paid attention much to the jiu-jitsu scene nowadays, or what's your take on how things are right now?
I mean, I do a little bit. I still, I'm fans of a lot of the guys that are out there. Some of the guys are still guys that I helped back in the day, So I keep an eye on what they're doing and what's going on. I try to watch some flow grappling for sure. I mean, we tried to be flow grappling back in the day, but the internet just wasn't what it is today.
Yeah.
And do some stuff like that. But yeah, I still watch it a little bit, not as much. I went to the last Abu Dhabi. That was really cool. I think I try to go to as many fight to win events as I could go to. I think Seth does a cool job. He's like an old friend from back in the day. He's as OG as they come out of Colorado. Yeah. Those guys. So, I mean, I try to pay attention, but I don't watch everything. I don't know everything that's going on.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Like even myself, like I have to pay attention, but there's just too much, like I, once in a while I do some work with guys at Flow, and there's a guy, Michael Sears, and he'll know like the blue belts up and coming, and, I'm getting older. I can't see all those guys anymore, but it was funny. I remember ADCC 2005, I basically ended up doing what you were doing there, like working as an interviewer and commentary and stuff like that. but I still remember to this day you're interviewing Jacare after he won, and you're speaking in Portuguese, and he understood, but you were kind of confused. You were like, "Hey, you did a lot of good takedowns out there. Are you training your wrestling?" And he's like, "No, just jiu-jitsu." And you're like, "No, but you did a lot of like wrestling takedowns. Are you training wrestling?" He's like, "Nah, just jiu-jitsu." So a lot of crazy, competitors, and I think that the mindset was a lot different back then. Would you agree? Like it was more of like a, go forward, like kind of fight to kill. And it's not that it's better or worse now, but like it was definitely different. What do you think is the kind of the most different things that you see for today's like jiu-jitsu game and the competitions now?
I mean, for me, the biggest difference is that when I started jiu-jitsu, we were training jiu-jitsu to show it was the best martial art, the best combat art that it was. So our jiu-jitsu classes were frequently like, hey, if a wrestler comes in tonight, they tend to stand like this. Who here used to wrestle? Okay, so if a wrestler comes in, we're going to work on all of our wrestling counters. We're going to work on our submissions off the takedown. And we really looked at it more as, okay, if somebody comes in off the street today and Hal picks one of the white belts to fight this guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We always had our white belt enforcer, the white belt assassins. It was BJ Penn for a while. I was there when Frank Shamrock came in, and BJ,
Oh, wow.
Frank, when, BJ was like 130 pounds, triangled Frank, like did the little, while he had him triangled, and then Frank passed it out of it. So it was just different in that way, and the jiu-jitsu tournaments were looked at more as like an entry level to before you would go fight MMA, right? It wasn't MMA back then. It was called Vale-Tudo, right?
Yeah.
So it was a completely different thing back then. So, it was really like preparing for either street fights or street defense, or getting ready to fight in Vale-Tudo. And it was much more about like, at the beginning, you weren't really worried like, oh, this guy comes in and he's playing De La Riva guard. You know, like there's another jiu-jitsu guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If another jiu-jitsu guy came in for another school of the house, then the warm-up became as hard as it could be to try to make that guy throw up. When a new guy came in and he was from another school, everybody was pissed. We were like, oh, man, Kurt or Hal or Dave or BJ, Cameron, whoever was running the warm-up knew that our goal was to like wipe this guy out energy-wise and try to throw up. So you knew warm-ups were going to be really hard that day. So then, of course, when you were picked to spar with him, I know I personally, and I'm probably answer for everybody on my team, my goal was to punish him as hard as possible for making him suck so bad, that day. And I think that's a lot of why we had our reputation. Half realized, that he wasn't making us super, super technical fighting guys. Like our techniques, I think, were solid foundations. But he made us aggressive, mean, and very hard-headed, just always going for the submission and always trying to plow through and be on top.
Yeah.
So just a different, just think, I don't know, things like now I look at it like I've gone and I train sometimes, and people point out like, like, hey, here's a heel hook here, like, oh, well, heel hook's illegal, and it's like, well, not where I come from, but like, just so I don't know, it's more cautious. I guess people don't get hurt as much, but I mean, it was a grinder I mean, new people quit like flies at house back in the day. You earned every day you were there.
Yeah. It was more like a fight club, like people would show up and it was like the wipeout, like there was no intro program. It was like, oh, you're new, let's beat the shit out of you. Like, and then if you survived and you liked it, you just kept coming, and
Bobby Southworth taught my first class, and there was some white belt class, but the first class you were definitely thrown to the wolves.
Yeah.
You learned like, cross choke, what the guard is, maybe something like that, couple techniques, and then, hey, sparring for an hour, like boom, you went through the ringer of sparring right away.
Yeah. I remember Gumby had a line, or was it Gumby or was it you? But one of you guys said basically like back in the day, jiu-jitsu, you train jiu-jitsu to compete against martial arts, whereas now it's jiu-jitsu against jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? And it definitely has changed. One of the things that I love the fact that pro jiu-jitsu is here. Guys can make essentially like you made the statement. Guys back in the day, you did tournaments essentially just as warm-ups to get into MMA because there was no money in jiu-jitsu. Like maybe one tournament a year paid out money, but now obviously before the coronavirus came, there was 3 tournaments or 3 events a weekend that you could fight pro, pro grappling. So what do you think about like the direction of like where the pro grappling is going and where it's come from? And you've kind of been involved in and out of that a little bit as well. You actually refereed Metamoris 3, I believe, the Eddie Bravo and Hoyler match. So tell us a little bit about your take about professional jiu-jitsu, and like, did you ever foresee that the professional jiu-jitsu would get as big as it is now?
Metamoris is another whole crazy story for sure. The professional jiu-jitsu, I love it, man. I mean, we tried to do that back in the day. Rico Ciapparelli, we helped him out a lot with PSL.
Yeah.
We sponsored some of the first super fights at Grapplers Quest West back in the day. Put $1,000 of our own money, and we had a super fight, and we also had 8-man there. If you look back at like who the 8-man, people that were in that tournament, like Tony DeSouza, Matt and Mark Hughes were there, Luke Stewart, Nicky O'Riggs, BJ Penn, JD Penn, Reagan Penn, Garth Taylor. I mean, there's probably a dozen Mark Lehman that I don't even, Big Joe Daddy, all the Jackson guys, Diego Sanchez was in that. So back in the day, like all the fighters would come to these tournaments, and when we would give away $1,000, people would be so happy. And so for me now to see people can actually make a living and work on doing that, like I think all of the different events, what Eddie's doing, what Seth's doing, with those guys, I don't know what the guys from Polaris is. That's a cool show. I've watched some of those too. So it's all great, man. Like it's all great. I like seeing all of it. The only thing I don't really like about the new school jiu-jitsu is like all the adding rules, and it's just like, man, it's too crazy. It should be less and less rules,
Yeah. Do you like the Seth, like kind of like all submissions legal and no points kind of thing, like that sub only kind of rule set? Or
I would like to see good matches. Whichever rule set creates good matches is cool to me. You can have a terrible match with any type of rule set. When I first heard about combat jiu-jitsu with Eddie, like I kind of thought it was going to be dumb, but man, when you're sitting there and the fight starts to solve, it reminds me of House back in the day. You start at House, the guy just had permission to start smacking you in the face. So that was an element that was always involved in our jiu-jitsu. Like, hey, you could just start getting smacked in the face. So that's pretty cool. And I'm excited that people can make money in jiu-jitsu. It's about time. In the past, there was only like a certain echelons, ruling class, like upper level of people that were allowed to make money in jiu-jitsu. But now it's on for the most part.
It's definitely times have changed. Like obviously with social media, black belts and pro grapplers can teach seminars like never before. You see guys teaching like 2 or 3 a weekend all over the world, and booked for like months on end. And there's so many events now, and again, like you guys used to run your own tournaments too, like the World Grappling Games, I believe. What was your tournament called back in?
We were tournaments. So I never was actually an official tournament promoter, but I helped out with so many different events.
But at the end of the day, like again, you guys contributed a lot to the sport, especially in Southern California, and obviously media to the world. It's times do change, but it's good and bad. We just have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. I personally, I love it. Some stuff I don't, but it is what it is. Any grapplers or any guys that you are watching right now that you kind of like, that kind of still maybe that you feel like represent that like generation from that where we came from, that you maybe some guys that you enjoy to watch nowadays?
Yeah, Gary Tonin, man, since the first time I ever saw him compete in New York, like that was the same day I met Paul Moran, the Open Mat Radio guys, and Rafa and them, and I can't remember the name of that event, but it was in New York City, and
Ultimate Absolute.
What was it called?
Ultimate Absolute.
Ultimate Absolute. My boy Black Rob was there, and all the Henzo dudes, and it was a great event. But I did feel like that, you know, Gary fought really well and kind of got screwed on the points and the whole thing. And I just hit him up afterwards, like, "Yo, dude, I thought you won that. It was kind of bullshit. I'm sorry." I was like, "You got any sponsors?" He's like, "No." And I was like, "Can I sponsor you then?" He's like, "Who the fuck are you?" You know. And so, you know, we've remained friends, and you know, I feel like you know, Gordon Ryan, a lot of the guys from Eddie's. I mean, there's so many good guys out there. It's hard to really, you know, name this dude or name that dude. A lot of exciting fighters out there doing their stuff. So it's cool.
Yeah, I remember the Ultimate Absolute. You and I commentated a couple matches that day. We were like kind of in a little ghetto setup in the hallway. We had to like try to keep quiet. With Eddie Bravo and Denny Prokopos did it with us as well. And I remember Gary beat Tagarella first round, and then I think he had a second match with Raider or something. I can't remember who it was, or Celso, but yeah, it was a good tournament, you know. And
they went out of bounds, kind of weird, and Celso jumped on his back, and they gave him for that. And it was like, he was like, already down, you know, like, come on.
Yeah.
So, but it was cool. Whatever, you know, Gary's really cool. There's a lot of really exciting guys out there, man. I don't know everybody's names and stuff, but I see a bunch of cool people.
Yeah, and Celso was another guy that you kind of you mentioned it, like you guys used to pick out like the top blue and purple belts, and I remember seeing Celso the first time I ever saw him was when you guys put a tape of him fighting Mark Bocek at a purple belt.
Red, remember Kid Red? Wow.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah. So he
in Brazil, we used to see each other. We were like glow sticks in the middle of everybody else, you know.
Yeah, so Bocek, he fought in the UFC for a while, then he retired, and you know, he's around. I haven't really seen him too much. He came to a seminar. We had the Mendez brothers out here, but yeah, Bocek fought Celso Vinicius, and like I said, you guys kind of spotted, you know, at that point, Celso. I didn't know who he was. I was like, who's this kid with the, you know, floppy hair? And then almost like, you know, years later, he's like one of the best grapplers in the world. You know, world champ. He's a beast. You know, so. Yeah, you know, you guys were essentially like flow grappling pretty much back in the day. And it's funny because if you look at like the sport, or sorry, the beginning of flow sports, like the Floriani brothers, they essentially started their company the exact same way that you guys did, you know, going to the, you know, wrestling matches and filming it and uploading it. And I still remember you telling me the X Mission or the LA Sub X, you were like, greatest event, but it was 10 years too early. You know, the internet wasn't ready. People's, you know, streams were crashing. I remember I was at work. I used to work at a group home, and I was like trying to stay up and watch it. It was like the middle of the night, and it kept freezing and shit. So, you know, times have definitely evolved. You know, jiu-jitsu is kind of spread out to the masses now, and you know, people like, you know, building huge careers, making money. The guys like Gordon Ryan, you know, claiming to make $500,000 to $1 million a year now, and DVD sales and all this. But you know, the whole point of my podcast is to kind of give credit to the guys that paved the way, the fighters, the coaches, and of course, like, you know, you're being one of the first media guys. So I think that you know, a lot of what we have today wouldn't be where it is if it wasn't for guys like you kind of paving the way. Like I spoke to Leka Vieira the other night, and she was like, you know what? Whenever you're the first person to do something, you're going to take shit, you know? And she was like, I was the first girl at my academy. So all the guys wanted to just beat the shit out of me until I left. So she's like, but that's how it is. Whenever you got to pave the way, it's going to be tough. So, you know, you guys must have went through hell being the first gringos to do what you did. But at the end of the day, you started it off for other companies to kind of, you know, pick up the ball and continue, and basically began the whole media drive in jiu-jitsu. So on behalf of the community, thank you. You know, you guys did a great job. And, you know, like we said, like the 101 Submissions DVD will probably go down in the history. There's 3 volumes. Still waiting for number 4 to come out, but you never know. But, you know, those are classics. You know, I remember in the fight shop, you just used to play them all day long. You guys were, we used to have like different remix tapes and all that. The tape trading industry itself was so crazy back then. Another funny little story that I have is first time I ever spoke to Kenny Florian was trading tapes, like in like '98. And then like 10 years later, I brought him out to Canada for something to do with the UFC. And I asked him something and he's like, yeah, don't you remember we traded like jiu-jitsu tapes back in the day? I was like, shit, you're right. You know what I mean? Like it's just, we all did that same thing, like we all kind of started in, back in the day when there was no internet, there was no nothing. It was like maybe one discussion forum and like, go to this link and buy this OTM DVD, and I think it was cool too, the fact that you guys were the first ones to really, bring the worlds and all those major tournaments to Brazil, from Brazil to the United States, through Paquetá and what was the relationship like working with a guy like Paquetá and like, being able to facilitate like, that kind of avenue? Did you guys kind of really expect jiu-jitsu to grow, and like do you think there was any relevance to what you were doing, or are you just trying to make money? Like what was the kind of the reason behind the reason back then?
Well, I mean, I just started videotaping the matches because we wanted them for our own team,
Gotcha.
and guys would come to house from Brazil and they would bring some Paquetá videos, and when they first started coming, I was already kind of making VHS tapes for OTM, and people would ask me to copy the tapes because I had tape duplicators. I lived right across the street from a Target. So every 28 days, I would return my 4 VHS players and get 4 brand new ones. And then Andy and I would keep those running 24 hours a day, 1 master, 3 copies, and just make tapes. So when I finally went to Brazil, in '99, and I met Paquetá, I bought a bunch of tapes from him, and I told him, I said, hey, I'm like, when I take these tapes to America, I'm copying them, and sometimes I'm selling them, and when I see you next time, I'm going to give you some money. And then fast forward 2 years later, I saw him, and he didn't even remember me, and I was like, hey, I had somebody translating. I think it was Carlos Escajega that was translating for me, and I was like, hey, tell this guy part of the reason I made it to Brazil was selling his tapes, and I have some money for him. And he was like, what? And then he was like, what's great? And then I started talking to him, and he saw I had my video camera, and we actually taped a tournament together, and then I started editing all of his tapes.
Okay.
Being some other editor, I said I would do them for free. And then he asked me, we spent years digitizing all of his old high 8 footage, like all those old Hickson matches, and I guess all those ended up at Flow. I don't know. I was trying to buy them, and then somebody else got them, so I don't know.
No, they're not at Flow, from what I understand, but somebody else has got them in Brazil. Somebody picked them up, so we'll see what happens.
The European guy bought them for Hickson or something, but
Yeah,
I don't know. It's getting dark. Should I turn a light on? Can you see me?
it got a little dark.
You
got a light there? Okay, better.
My bad. It's getting dark here in Vegas. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're good.
So then I went to Paquetá's house in Copacabana, and I smuggled a bunch of money inside my sunga under my shorts. And I gave him the cash. I paid him like a commission for every tape that I had sold, like I told him I would, over 2 years. I didn't expect it to take me 2 years to get back to Brazil.
Yeah.
And like he was so excited that I gave him the money, and then we just became really good friends. And he used to like just pull out the treasure trove of all the different matches from back in the day. So somebody's got like some incredible matches of Hickson, Hoyler. He had like all house blue belt, purple belt, brown belt matches.
Wow.
All the different guys. So it was cool. A lot of old Sergio Pena stuff.
Yeah. Well, like I said, man, you were one of the first people to bring that, those tournaments, to United States and kind of distribute them to the world. And, that's how guys like me, you know, kind of got into seeing what jiu-jitsu really was. So you made, you know, there's a ripple effect to that, right? Because, you know, I remember just seeing like, you know, jiu-jitsu on like the UFC and seeing what Hoist did. And I had no idea that there was a sport, you know,
Right.
until I was like, I was a world martial arts or somebody else sold them. And then there was like 4 VHS tapes you can get. And then I was like, oh shit, this is an actual thing in Brazil. I thought it was just going to be like Vale Tudo tournaments, but then I saw the actual sport and I was like, oh wow, oh now there's more. And then that's when you guys started selling them, and then you know it just kind of picked it up. And then I was like learning who all the different fighters were, and then you know eventually made it out to Brazil. So yeah, it's you guys, like I said, man, you guys contributed a lot. Yeah, Scotty, I kind of, you know, that's kind of running out of time here. I only have a recorder for like just over an hour, but I asked a lot of stuff that I wanted to, you know, kind of a trip down memory lane. And, you know, like I said, you know, you hooked me up big time back in the day. I'm forever grateful. And, you know, again, you know, on behalf of the community, thanks everything you contributed for the sport. Anything you want to say before we kind of sign off here?
Yeah, man, I definitely want to thank you for everything. I mean, in some ways that you kind of picked up where I left off on a lot of this stuff and done a better job with it. You know, one thing I just want to send a shout out to everybody in the community and just say, hey, you know, I do have this hospital. It's called chipsahospital.org. If anybody's family member or loved one is dealing with cancer, we do free doctor calls, free second opinions. You know, we'll try to take care of anybody and have taken care of people in the you know, community. Verdun's friend was just down from Brazil getting treated by us. We've also added, you know, stem cells, and we've been doing a lot of different stuff for different fighters and UFC guys. So we do a lot more than just cancer. We can do autoimmune therapy. We can do stem cell therapy, regenerative medicine, PRP, TRT, every single one. So if once this coronavirus is over, if anybody or even before, if you have a family member that needs to speak to a doctor and you want to you know, get a real honest opinion about what's going on, that's what we do. You know, we're here to offer different solutions, and anybody in the fight community can drop my name and I'll make sure they get taken care of.
Oh, cool. Eddie Bravo was he not there recently to see you guys?
Yep, Eddie just came down and did like 120 million stem cells and NAD plus, a bunch of Myers cocktails, high dose vitamin C, PEMF, hyperbaric oxygen, IV ozone. We did a full like week-long tune-up on him.
Nice, nice. All right, guys, you heard it there. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Scotty, once again, I've said it like 50 times. I'll say it again. Thanks again for staying with me and talking about the old times. And once again, guys, if you like this video, give me a like over here. Give me a subscription, please. Check out Scotty's stuff. I'll put some links to connect you to Scott Nelson, Scotty Too Hottie, they used to call him back in the day. You know, once again, thank you for your time, guys. Thanks, Scotty. I'll see you guys on episode 6. I got a really special guest coming as well. So stay tuned, guys. We're going to be talking about more of the legends of jiu-jitsu and all the people that contributed to jiu-jitsu and paved the way for the sport we have today. See you next time, guys.
See you next time. Thank you.